Lisa, welcome. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you. It's very exciting to be here.
Very exciting. So what we were talking about before is I was down in Melbourne a couple weeks ago, and we were working with a whole group of educators, and they're using the Unleashed Learning System to make learning stick. And we were talking about the power of the classroom. Mm-hmm. And we talk with trainers and presenters about the power of location, and early child educators always talk about this. So I thought we could bring you in and bring your expertise and start the conversation about why is the classroom or the location so important?
Well, I am excited to speak about that. I think in early childhood we tend to talk about the environment, but I guess it's the same as the classroom or the location, similar words, but particularly people in early childhood are quite familiar with this concept of the environment as the third teacher. And some people have heard of this before. For other people, it's a new way to look at it. But it comes from Loris Malaguzzi, so Reggio Emilia philosophy, and the idea that the environment itself is a teacher. So as adults, we are teachers. Parents are children's first teachers. But adults are teachers. Other children are teachers of their peers, but the environment itself, the physical location, whether that be indoors or outdoors, is also a teacher. This idea that the environment has the power to inspire and to guide and to craft the way children engage with each other and subtly, sort of indirectly steer children towards types of engagement and to be ready to learn and to stay in a state of learning. So it's this really beautiful concept that the environment itself is a teacher.
It makes me think of people that are watching this or listening to this, if they go to their learning space or their classroom or their professional development space, what's it teaching? It's a great, it makes me think like, what is this space teaching?
Yes.
And the intentionality, that's why I love early child educators, because you're so intentional about what you're doing. You have so much to inform all of us in all the professions. So that's where we wanted to start. And I want to jump into a little bit deeper because you not only have the EC hat, but you also have the positive psychology hat.
I do. I'm a very lucky person to be in both the spaces of early childhood education and wellbeing science.
Well, that's why you're here. That's why you're here. So one of the things that we talk about at Unleashed Learning and then positive psychologists talk about is this idea of priming people for learning. So I thought you could tell, what does it mean to prime someone from, I mean, we're around a lot of delivering information. So that's a kind of a different way of thinking about setting up a space or just in general priming people. So what does that mean to prime people for learning?
Well, I guess basically what it says, are you in a position where you are ready to learn? I guess psychologically speaking, we talk about one stimulus helping prepare a child or a learner to then respond to the next stimulus. But educationally, it's about our children in a space where they are going to be open and receptive to learning. So what sort of hints or indications or information can you give a student or a learner before they come into the space so that they're open and ready to learn? And I think that's what I love about this idea of the environment, because even before a child begins to engage with a teacher or another student, that space around them is speaking to them. So I was thinking of an example of a secondary school that I went into a couple of years ago. In a beautiful new facility, they had built a space for their year 11s and 12s, and it was stunning. Architecturally speaking, it was beautiful. It was light and bright and beautiful white furniture, and as I said, from an architectural point of view, it was stunning. But when you walked through the space, you kind of felt quite cold and quite clinical, and there was nothing on the walls that spoke to the students of the students. In fact, there was nothing on the walls. The architects wanted them kept quite clean. So what that environment said to the students when they walked in was, you're not here, don't be here, don't touch anything, don't relax. And in fact, the students, they ended up going outside at lunchtime instead of being in these beautifully crafted spaces. But the environment was saying to them in quite a passive way, you're not included here, you don't belong. And I sort of contrast that to a way that I intentionally set up my classroom, and I know many early childhood educators do all around the country. Before the children come in, I in fact turn off the lights because they're fluorescent, but we have lots of lamps. So there's soft lighting. I have music going very quietly in the background, some scented electric candles now, and then lots of softening fabrics, cushions, pieces of material, teddy bears, space. So when the child walks in, the environment is saying to them, come in, it's warm, it sounds nice, it feels nice, there's space for you to traverse throughout the room. There's sort of winding pathways, nothing's in rows. There's a spot where you can sit on the floor on a cushion if you don't feel like you can be sitting up or standing up, or if you want to be sort of, in a bit of a corner. So even before I speak a word to a child or other children speak a word, that environment is telling them so much.
When you're talking about priming your body, I can't mirror what you did, but it's almost like the space shuts us off or it opens us up.
Yes.
And we talk about it unleashing the affective filter. So we've got to lower the guard because if we wanted to stick, they've got to be open. But your body, as you described it, was either open or was shut down. So we can architecturally have a beauty, but it still could shut us down.
Yes.
Right? Or it may not be beautiful, but we can create the space for that to happen is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, from that wellbeing science point of view, that sort of underpinning theory from Fredrickson about broaden and build. So this idea of positive emotions, if you have the opportunity to experience positive emotions, and that's not just happiness, that can be serenity and interest and awe. If you experience those positive emotions, it does actually have a broadening and a building effect, that your mind is broadened, and so the repertoires, thought and action repertoires that are available to you are broadened, and then you can build on the social opportunities around you, as opposed to that idea of the negative emotions where you do tend to shut down. So if you walk into an environment and it is warm and inviting and it feels safe and it feels inclusive, then you are going to experience that positive emotion. And whether it's joy or whether it's serenity, either one of those still has that opportunity to broaden and build you cognitively and socially. And of course, then when your mind is open and you feel safe and secure, then you are primed for learning.
Well, our mission is to make learning stick for everyone, and this is the stuff it takes to make that happen.
Yes.
I'm just thinking, but we've got all these people taking the certification program. So if they're listening, hopefully they are, but I bet you're going to get a lot of ideas for the documentation they're going to collect to get certified for the classroom. Because they're probably thinking the music they're using or the different ways that welcome people into their space. So I'm thinking of them
good.
right now. I want to jump to this idea that walls that teach,
Yes.
which I love this idea. I know a lot of people are familiar with it. But from staff developers to presenters or whoever it is, our space, can you tell us what it means for walls to teach and maybe what we could do with the walls to get them to teach for us?
There's a really old saying about, or if the walls could speak, or, the walls are listening. And it's so true, though, because when you step into that space, even without words, the environment is telling you something. It's telling you how to behave. And something that we try to do in early childhood education, and it's the walls, but it's also the surfaces and the whole room, is for the space to offer you visible signs of tenderness. So just the very small things, whether you're putting images on the wall, whether you are having soft fabrics in the room, whether you are having plants, they are signalling to you before you walk in, or as you walk in, about what is expected and allowed in the environment. And Loris Melaguzzi has this beautiful idea that the environment is an aquarium of ideas that mirrors the values of the people within it. And you sort of see that when you step into, whether it's even somebody's home, you step in and the first thing, you sort of have this idea about what the values are of the people in the home, and whether that's your workspace or a classroom, that idea that it does mirror the values of the people who occupy the space. So I guess for people who are setting up an environment, whether that's a classroom for adults or a training space or a classroom for young children, take that moment to think, are these spaces reflecting my values? And it can be very simply as much as saying, well, I'm going to have plants in my room because I know that speaks to life and joy and nature and serenity. Am I going to invite my students, if you have the luxury of your own classroom?
Hopefully they do. We're working on it.
Are children, one of the questions I ask myself as a teacher when I'm setting up an environment is, when the children step into the room, are they going to be able to see themselves there? And I mean that sort of emotionally see themselves there, but literally see themselves there. So I always invite my families to send in a family photograph with their children. And I totally say selfies are fantastic. Let's just get everyone in the picture, email me a selfie. And we have photo frames, and the children assist me to put the photograph in the photo frame. So that frame of their family photograph stays in the classroom for the whole year. And the beautiful things that I see children doing with that, they're walking around, they've just got the photo frame under their arm. Or they'll have lunch and they set the photograph up and open up their lunchbox. And in that way, they're inviting their family into them with lunch. And I see children who their best friend is not there that day, they carry that photograph of their friend around with them. So even though their friend is not physically in the environment, the provisions in the environment are facilitating them with their sense of belonging and connection, and that also sense of a positive emotion and joy that can happen in the environment.
You know, as you're saying that, I think what people might hear is, oh, that's early childhood. But actually, it's for all of us, because we know science of learning. I mean, it's not, this is what what you folks do in your area is so intentional. It's so in depth. And that's why I wanted you here, because it's the same understanding. Now, it might be different if you have adults. It might be different if you're working with K-12. It might be, but the understanding of that space, that walls that teach, and if a student's carrying the picture around, their guard is down, and learning can rise and it can stick the way you're describing it.
And there's lots of different ways that you can make that transpire. You don't have to have your own classroom, but if you're sharing a classroom and perhaps you're in a senior school space, just have that question in your mind: when the students step into the room, are they going to see themselves there? It doesn't literally have to be them, but if you have a group of students or a year level of students who are interested in a certain sport or follow a certain code of sport, are there pictures of that around in the room?
Right.
So just on some level, they see themselves recognised and validated in that space. And even if you're thinking about Zoom, which of course we all are now, just that idea of, once again, priming your learners to be open to learning when they enter that Zoom space. Don't have them just arrive cold, get them to be thinking about something before they come in, or even say, if it's a small enough group that you can facilitate this, bring with you something that is special to you or something that brings you joy, or bring something blue. And then when everyone enters the Zoom room, take those few minutes to say, what have you brought to share? And it just allows that sense of connection and a little bit of sort of competence and autonomy. And that's another one of those great theories from wellbeing science, self-determination theory, which says that for individuals to be psychologically strong, we need to be able to experience competence, autonomy, and relatedness in our environment. So you're talking about competence. Do you feel competent and capable? Do you have a sense of mastery? Are you autonomous? Are there ways that you can influence and enact in your environment? And relatedness, of course, relationships. So you take that back to something like Zoom, where you go, how can you do that? Have people just share something that brings them joy. So there's a small moment of connection there, of relatedness, and just that little bit of autonomy. I'm coming into a Zoom room, but I've been able to bring something that's important to me. So there's ways that you can use these ideas of positive emotion and broadening and building and self-determination of being competent, autonomous, and relationships. You can bring that into your environment to prime people for learning and to help that stick, regardless of where they are.
That's right. And that just reminds you again that that location for staff developers or presenters or for K-12 teachers or whoever it is one of the most important tools we've got at our disposal, and it lowers student stress, it lowers our stress, it creates community, it does the work for us.
Yes.
So I got one real quick question because we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask about inclusion because that's a really important key in the system. And we've got students from all different races and genders and sexual orientations and languages, and we know to make learning stick, we need equal participation and collective sense of belonging. So you've mentioned it briefly, but what are some things when we're setting up that space that can create that kind of inclusion for people where it's kind of doing the work for us to help it stick? So what are some thoughts about that?
So I guess when I think about inclusion, and I'm by no means an expert in inclusion, but I guess I think of inclusion in regards to physical inclusion, but also sort of social and emotional and psychological inclusion. So from a physical point of view, when a student walks into a space, once again that question, can I see myself here? Are there physical spaces? Is there enough room for me to fit physically if I need extra space? Is there room for me to move around? If I don't want to be right in the middle, is there a safe sort of space where I can be? I love this idea of the illusion of seclusion, that people can be a part of it, but also back a little bit. And certainly in early childhood, I'm always making sure there's a little sort of cubby spot somewhere where someone can go just to be back. Because inclusion can also be about just having the space to be who I am in this moment and not having to be right in the middle of everything where I might have to have my guard up because I don't feel so secure. So seclusion in a way can also be about having space to be apart. But so I guess there's those sort of physical ideas of being able to be included, but also that emotional space too, that when I'm in this environment, do I feel that in some way I'm connected, in some way that I have that sense of autonomy, that I can bring my own self and what's important to me? So in regards to how you set up an environment, I guess again it comes back to this idea that the walls speak and the walls teach. What do I see around me that is telling me that I belong here? Or I would hate to think, but what do I see around it that's telling me that I don't fit? So I think it's just that subtle, intentional, implicit teaching and preparation of the environment to say, when people come in, are they going to feel and see themselves there, and are they going to feel that on some level they belong and they're included? It's
fantastic. Just as we close, I was at a university a long time ago teaching, and there was a tutorial room. We were talking about this conversation. All the posters it said famous mathematicians, and they were all white men. And I said, so who does maths? And they said, oh, white men do maths.
Yes.
So that's become kind of the joke in maths classes that we work with. We say, does the walls communicate who does maths and who doesn't do maths?
And that's some of those messages are so explicit, but also those really subtle messages. So I would just encourage people to try and, if you have a classroom or a learning space, before you invite people in, step back, take a breath, just look around and say, what are all these little things, these mosaic, these pieces, they add up to something, and is it a mirror that's reflecting what you want it to reflect?
This is why I wanted you here. So, this is why early childhood educators are leaders in teaching and learning. You just are. This is what you talk about. So before we end, we always have a question for the audience. So let me ask that question really quick. So Lisa has given you a whole bunch of ways to think about the key of classroom if you're a K-12 teacher, or the key of location if you're a presenter, staff developer. So we want to know, what is one thing you do in the location that you think helps make learning stick for everyone? So some of the best conversations take place after the episode. So jump over there. You can grab our free ebook. There's more stuff there if you need it. So Lisa, thank you for making the trip to the studio today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm happy to talk about it anytime.
Fantastic. Thank you for the work you do, and thank you for the work you do for the world. We hope this episode inspires you to think about your learning location as a key that makes learning stick for everyone. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, bye.
If you're an educator at a school, business, or organization, knowing how to make learning stick for everyone might be the most important thing you know how to do. Make learning stick for everyone. My new book is here. To find out more, go to unleash-learning.com.